Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, having this conversation for H2O Post Party with Mr. Dore Narayana. So, really want to introduce him. Will be a long, lengthy introduction. He's a subject matter expert in the industry, and also have been my mentor. So, Mr. Dore, if you can just introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Panita. So I've been in this industry for a while, since the 1980s, to put it to put it briefly. So I started off in a local authority in Penang. I was in MPPP, Majlis Perbandaran. So I saw the sewerage management under local authorities until 1994, actually 1996 in Penang, when the privatization took place and the states were taken over one by one. And then Water came in, 1994 onwards, and 96 in Penang. And I joined Water at that time and continued until 2015 when I retired from Water. So I've been in this industry for quite a bit. Um, and I've also seen how the privatization took place, why, and so on. Of course, pros and cons. So why this was good, why it was not good, and how this has grown. And today we are here and talking about the sewerage tariff increase, which is same from the time I joined. In 1996, it was 8 ringgit. And interestingly, if I can just tell this, when I was in MPPP in Penang, the tariff for sewerage, they did charge a tariff. It was based on the number of toilets, right? So each toilet was charged 2 ringgit. And during my time, I felt, and there's some variations as well between the urban area of Georgetown and the remaining areas, So I was instrumental in raising the tariff from 2 to 3 across the island for everyone, all connected services. And I did it single-handedly, I mean, it's really funny to think about it. There's no campaign and no nothing. We just went for an approval from the council, got it gazetted, and the bill started going. And surprisingly, not a single person objected. That was a 50% increase. And another interesting thing here is that because this is per toilet basis, and then when Water came in, it was 8 ringgit per house. And if you had 3 toilets in your house, you actually have a reduction with Water. From 9, it goes to 8. So the richer people who had 3 toilets will be paying less. And those which one toilet were paying 3 ringgit now start paying 8 ringgit. This was the funny thing that happened at that time. And I think I'll stop with that.
No, it's quite interesting. Which I was thinking, where like you started at 8 ringgit way back in 1994, and today is still 8 ringgit. Is that a success story? In a way, because you managed to do the work without increasing the tariff. But before that, I just want to welcome everyone who are listening to us today on H2O Post Party, and we are from Water Think Tank. And Water Think Tank has been set up to bring in all this kind of conversation, not just locally in Malaysia, but as well as any part of the world. The interest we have is on the technology, on the ideas and innovations, as well as conversations on as such, dissecting proposals or positions that government take. And in this case, SPAN actually have started public consultation for the proposal to increase sewerage tariff on 9th of November. I think it'll be ending by end of this week. And I thought this will be an interesting topic to discuss, as there always have been a lot of fear from the government side when they want to increase tariff. So I thought, let's see how it goes. And before we start this conversation, I just want to give, for the scene setting, what are the current sewerage contacts in the country. So for right now in Malaysia, we have about 7,000 over public sewage treatment plants, 1,300 over pumping stations, about 2,000 kilometers or more of sewer networks. And for connected services, we have about 4.78 million customers, while for the septic tank or dislodging services customers, there are about 1.36 million account holders in the country. And the tariff for connected services had ranged from 2 to 8 ringgit. That means 2 is for low-cost housing, 3 for kampongs and estates, 8 for domestic houses. While for dislodging, it has been between 2 to 6 ringgit a month. So that is how the situation had been for the last 27 years. Some may call it a success. Some may call it a failure. So I guess it's really from which angle we are looking at this. And so before we go further into conversation, Mr. Duray, so do you think the tariff should go up?
Everything else has gone up from 1994 to now. So I don't see why this should remain stagnant. So I mean, of course, there could be somebody who's arguing that this is not important, or there are other ways of doing it, or some for whatever other reason. And so when you call for this, I was expecting there'll be another person here who will be, debating on the opposing side that there should be no tariff increase. But you asked me that question. So really, I was thinking about what are the possible arguments that somebody may present that it shouldn't be. And frankly, I couldn't find many, that why it shouldn't go up. I think it should. And I think there are many, many compelling reasons why the tariff should go up. In fact, why it should have gone up much earlier and shouldn't have been left stagnant for so many years, which is why we are faced with an accumulated problem of trying to catch up, right? And that makes it far more easier, far more difficult to raise it to more reasonable levels in one, or like what is being proposed in 3 steps. I think that's barely achieving break even, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not really achieving much, not really giving a thing, but probably may set, if it is successful, may set the stage for further reasonable adjustments, which are painless and not felt. You can see every other industry is like that. It's always being adjusted periodically, so people don't have to deal with an accumulated problem. So, in conclusion, I said yes. I think there are many, many reasons why it should be adjusted.
Yes. You see, the interesting part, yes, you are right. So I was originally hoping to have people with a different view of, I know where your stand is. We had a lot of conversation about this, even predating this public consultation. So I was wondering if I can find someone who would be thinking from a different perspective, saying that tariff shouldn't go up. Ironically, everyone that I contacted actually agrees tariff should go up. They may have disagreement on the governance or the way regulator presented the case or something
Right.
like that, or maybe some other old unhappiness of how when India Water started way back and then there was a bailout. And I mean, they have this kind of grievances, but no one seems to have a grievances or tariff going up. So I thought, what I should do is post on social media, because social media is where, very fast people will be going against or unhappy over any increase or government decisions, right? And you'd be surprised. I find that people seems to be more interested in conversations like what I was mentioning to you before the program. I think today's newspaper or yesterday, they have a article on AAX passengers should not be treated as creditors. More people seem to be getting worked out on such topics, but no one seems to be getting worked out on the sewerage tariff being increased. In fact, couple of them actually commented in different groups saying that it has been way too long. The services are good, and we do not have any problem. And some even say kasihan IWK. So I mean, that is not something that normally we think we will get from social media. But ironically, I find that few people who seems to have shown interest, and they're not from the sector. Because of course, what I do is when someone comment like that, I have to go and check their profile to make sure they are not someone that I know or from the sector. So when I check that, I find that it's really surprising when I found out that these are just citizens and doing whatever stuff they're doing. So sometimes it makes me wonder whether this fear is misrepresented. Actually, no one is really objecting. The only objection probably come from fear from the politicians or the decision makers in the cabinet.
Yeah. So it looks like there's a national consensus that the tariff should go up. So in which case, what we are doing here is just preaching to the converted,
Yes, yes.
So anyway, I think maybe there is some apathy. There's some apathy, and when the increased bill hits, there might be people who might come back and say some things. But I really find very hard to find any reasons that people could offer which are reasonable enough to warrant us to relook at the tariff review itself. You see, so that could be one. That apathy part could be one reason, and the second thing is also like I think maybe they've into the bulk of the people. I mean, Malaysia is basically a quite an affluent country, comparatively, right? We don't have we have a huge middle class, and of course the upper class line. No? And of course, the people talk about this B40 and things like that. And even if you look at the B40, based on the statistics that statistics department, the B40 itself is divided to several categories, and the lowest one they have what do you call a household income of about 2,000 a month. That's not poor by many Asian country standards. In many Asian country standard, people live on the pavement and they don't know where the next meal is coming from. That kind of thing. So I think that even our hardcore poor can afford that 5 ringgit that is being proposed for the lower income household. I think the increased tariff is 5 ringgit, if I'm not mistaken. So which is to me is a very very small percentage line. So to the bulk of the people who are above, I don't think this 15 ringgit that is being proposed eventually in 2024 is going to be a huge burden. That's what I'm thinking. And the increases are going in 2 ringgit steps, if I'm not mistaken. No? I can't recall now the actual
I
thing.
think I actually took some notes. They put there it'll be for low cost. It only goes by 2 ringgit in 2024. So it's
Yeah,
another 3 years from now. Domestic actually goes up by next year in a year's time to by 2 ringgit as well. Actually, it's a very marginal increase. It
yeah, very
says,
marginal. And
yeah, very marginal.
eventually the domestic goes to 15 only, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm, mm,
That's in 2024. So, which is, in fact,
yeah.
when in fact I was asking why, they also mentioned in the paper that their cost is 17 ringgit, but eventual tariff is only 15, which means there is still going to be a cross subsidy from other sectors, commercial and other sectors. It's not still fully covering OPEX,
Yes,
which is
yes.
what Indavatar is all about. No, OPEX. No, the capex, of course, is out of the whole equation uh, because developers provide it or government provides it. It's only the OPEX part that we are talking about.
Yes, yes, you're right. So, and for example, when I'm looking, I think one key thing, I would like to get back on the public consultation exercise per se, because I was I just felt like the way it was done and the public consultation paper, the way it was published itself was totally not exciting. I find it a
Mm.
bit, I don't know, too old fashioned for 2021, I guess, because after 15 years, SPAN is actually regulating. I was expecting much better mechanism of doing public consultation. There you have a document that literally, I thought this is really physically, when you're accessing it, you have to scroll it to the left, you have to scroll it to the right. I'm like, what are they using? What tool is that? That when it's so easy to do that. And I actually emailed, the email address that is given, I actually emailed them on the same day asking for a downloadable version so that I can actually really look at it and understand it. And I didn't really receive a reply. So it really makes me wonder whether this public consultation was done in order either to get views or not to get views.
Yeah,
So I really had,
it's easier not to get views, right?
not really. Not really. Maybe that's what they thought. I have totally no idea. I'm just making assumption here. But from what I've heard from total strangers on, because what I did is I went to entrepreneur groups and posted. I went and posted in the homepreneurs, like all the small businesses who do businesses from home. I posted in all these groups. These are homepreneurs, people who work and do businesses from home, small businesses. And they actually supported.
Support.
Right? They support. So I feel like why wouldn't you do something in a way that is really want to hear opinion?
Yeah.
Like even if I went and check in SPAN website, I am unable to find the document, but of course I received through some other means, but it's not in the. I mean, I do not know, maybe somewhere, but it's not really visible. It's not something that you can go in, and I didn't hear any conversations about it. Because I mean, I do subscribe all those things, and I can't even hear all these conversations. So I really don't understand. I feel like my personal opinion, okay, of course, I have to put a disclaimer. I'm a former officer of India Water way back from 2001 to 2000 and early 2008. I'm not getting paid to do this by anybody. Okay. Uh, but right now, I'm just a citizen of the country. And yes, I've been paying 8 ringgit a month. And I really feel it doesn't make sense. In fact, it feels like a nuisance when you have to go and, luckily the bills are coming 6 months once. Otherwise, it really feel like a nuisance to just go through the process of, paying it even though it's online.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
feel like that rate doesn't make sense by two simple facts. Number one, the energy tariff has gone up. I think even the report, the consultation paper said 7 times within 1994 up to now. And second thing is by virtue of inflation rates. Just taking into these 2 points, that tariff doesn't make sense. Forget about the salary increase. Even other kind of health and safety requirements, environmental requirements that have come up. So all those requirements that needs more control mechanism, which definitely needs more money to be
yeah.
used, for operation, right? So, but there's these two virtues. So I really wonder why other utilities seem to be able to raise the tariff, including water, even though it's difficult. Why it's not sewage? What is slowing it down?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, just on the point of the inflation, if you really check, 8 ringgit in 1994 is worth more than 15 ringgit today. And 15 ringgit is the eventual tariff that they are looking at. Anyway, going back to what you said. So I think I also used to wonder because, of course, I'm also an ex India Water officer, and I'm not being paid by Punita or anybody else to, give my views here, entirely my own. I used to work in India Water, and every year it goes into loss and needs a subsidy because the tariff revenue is insufficient to cover costs. So that was happening over many, many years. So it was a loss-making company because the cost kept increasing.
Mhm,
Energy, which is a big chunk, of course,
mhm,
manpower and so many other things. And not only that, as India Water improved the infrastructure and service, their costs went up. So it was self-punitive. So
mhm.
when they got more treatment plants working, from some of them were not working before, from local authority, not Penang, yeah. So all other local authorities, so they had treatment plants which are crumbling. I mean, we don't blame them because they had no resources, no nothing, no people, and all that. Anyway, India Water was putting them back into order by refurbishment. So what happens is the plant which is not working, of course, consumes very little electricity and needs less manpower and all. But the moment it starts working, your costs go up, and then you go deeper into the rate. So that was a self-punitive kind of a cycle that was going on, and every year they had to go to government to ask for subsidy. So I was thinking that how come this government, every year, of course, there's a lot of begging board kind of thing. People go there and they have to present, and you'll be questioned, why are you efficient? Are you bloated? Are you this? And India Water has to go through this every time in order to get that subsidy. And of course, the subsidy won't be enough to cover entire gap, and they would have to cut corners and all that. So I was thinking, why is it, that government is so reluctant to give the small increase of tariff? And I then somebody told me that from the political perspective, India Water is receiving maybe 100 to 200 million. I don't really know exactly, but it's possibly 100 to 200 million. I think the paper mentions 90 million, if I'm not mistaken. So it could be maybe up to 200 million a year as subsidy, right? And in the government's big scheme of things, this is small money, you know. So they cannot do that for TNB because it will run into the billions. They cannot do that for any other utilities because the amounts are too much greater. So that could be one reason that the politicians here are thinking that, oh my God, let me just give 100 million to these guys, and then keep them quiet for a year and don't disturb my voters down there, because they are always under the impression that the voters get easily agitated by even small kind of things like that. Could be one reason. The second reason is that what value people attach to these services. So when you look at it, electricity, when your electricity goes, that's something you can feel, because this is something what we call as a private goods, that when your electricity goes in your house, only your house is affected, not the neighboring house, but when you talk about sewerage, there is two components to it. One is, of course, what you get out of it. That means when you flush, it goes away. But where it goes and what happens to it, you're not really bothered. You know what I mean? Just like a septic tank, also, when you want it to be dislodged when it is empty. But when it is full and overflowing into the drains, you don't really bother. So, in other words, what the private goods part of it, which the individual guy is only interested, is that my home should be clean and my immediate environment should be clean. But what happens in the river or what happens to the neighbors, I'm not really bothered. So that part of the component is what is increasing the cost. If you just had what we used to have in Penang, like the ideal system, so where you have the house is connected to the sewer and the sewer takes it to the sea, and we are conveniently an island there. So if we are discharging the entire raw sewage into the sea at a very low cost, excellent solution, and nobody bothered. And when India Water came and government came later and they built a huge treatment plant in Penang, in Jelutong, the cost of operation maintenance went up hugely, huge chunk. But the tariff was not increased. If you had increased the tariff, saying now I'm treating it and all, do you think anybody would have accepted? As far as the Penang guys were concerned, they were flushing and it was going away before in the water and after in the water. So no big difference. You see, so that's where the element of the public goods part comes in. But that is important for the environment, for the state, for the pollution of the sea, for the overall well-being of the community of the island, and the aesthetics and things like that. So that is the unique nature of sewerage, which has a big component of public goods, and that's one reason why people don't see the value to it. So going back to the value, how many people know what happened to their sewage when they flush it? They know it goes through a pipe somewhere, but they think it ends up in the river. But actually, it goes through a huge system of pipelines. It goes through a treatment system where it is treated to standards and then discharged. And all this takes a huge effort. And when you don't see anything happening, which is what many people say, where is India Water? I've never seen them. That's good, because if you saw them, means that something is wrong. So again, one anecdote I had in Penang was, I had a cousin. He had a house and sewer connected to the sewer, and he used to tell me, "What are you guys doing? I don't see you, and you every month, I have to pay this 8 ringgit." And he used to complain. And one fine day, the sewer broke below the kitchen at the back of this house. This is a semi-D house, so the sewer's inside the property, and it broke under the kitchen. And his whole kitchen was flooded with shit. Not only his shit, the entire neighborhood, because his house was on the low ground. And our guys went, I was then in Penang, our guys went, worked day and night over the weekend to resolve that problem, getting into the manholes, into the shit and getting it done. And he told me, you can charge me 100 ringgit a day, I will pay. Because when the problem comes is when you realize. When the problem hasn't come, you haven't seen, means the water is doing the job in an invisible way somewhere. So I think these are the unique things that's different. But so people tend to value things they see. When you see telecommunication, you got a phone, you see WhatsApp now, you can do your whatever, Google it, or you can do whatever. That is, you value that. But do you value the sewage? How can we demonstrate it? There was some suggestion that let's block up the sewer from the house of the guy who's not paying. Suppose you do that. I mean, it's not ethical and it's not health-wise, it's not done, right? But suppose you do that, and the conscientious objector, that I don't want in the water, I can deal. Let him keep the sewage for a day, just a day. What will happen? That will make it all the while that for 30 days they're charging you 8 ringgit to take your waste away and manage it. Not only take the waste away, but also treat it and discharge it safely. So that value thing is what I think is missing. And even today, I think many people don't realize that. And maybe the campaigns and even this public consultation that we talk about, the paper does not mention all this. That what are you getting for the 8 ringgit? I think that part is really missing, and many people don't understand that. Whereas electricity, you don't need to tell them; they know. Your cell phones, they know. Astro, even AX, Right?
Yes, you're
Yeah, sorry.
directly feeling it, right? Before
Sorry.
I just touch on the value bit, but before that, because you were talking about the achievement and all those things, this is what I expected from the public consultation paper. For those who have not read it, um, because these are reports that is being issued by the regulators, so I will take it as this is authentic numbers. Department of Environment report states that 96 point and in the public water treatment plants, public sewage treatment plants, which is under Inda Water, has an effluent compliance of 96.5%. SPAN actually reported that IWK has a service compliance level for their KPI at 98%. And a satisfaction survey that has been conducted shows that 89% of the people are satisfied. So probably a lot of these things and the value that you're telling, maybe they don't understand the value, or maybe they do. And maybe there's a difference between generations, like millennials and Generation Alpha, the younger ones. Probably they do understand because they're more socially conscious. Younger people seem to be more socially conscious. It is possible is the way things are being communicated. Sometimes I feel like those communication is self-serving. It's for those who are in the industry who understand it. It's not for those who are not in the industry
Yes,
for
yes,
them to
yes.
advertise with it. So I
That's
feel
right.
when I look at the document, I thought this is a bit more self-serving. Yes, I understand it because I'm actually in the industry. But how about those that you want to really get them to participate in this conversation?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the tendency to think in terms of compliances, for example, the compliances are important to DOE, right? But to the individual consumer, it's not very meaningful. That what does it mean? Yeah, okay. I mean, you're doing a job. You're doing your job, lah. You know what I mean? It's like so. And when you say complaints, resolution, and things like that, this is a bit of a negative way of looking at it. There shouldn't be any complaints. That's what I would expect. So, hey, there shouldn't be any. What are you talking about? Complaints and resolution. There shouldn't be any in the first place. You see what I mean? So, I think here is more like the awareness of what are you getting for your 8 ringgit. So, usually when you say value, economic value, and all that, people say that what am I depriving myself of by paying 8 ringgit to Indawater?
Mm, mm, mm,
You see, so supposing I went on a holiday for spending 10,000 ringgit, right?
mhm,
So with
mhm,
that 10,000 ringgit, I could have maybe went to restaurants for 20 times and went for a local holiday for 10 times. Now I deprive myself of all that just to go for one overseas vacation. That's how the
mhm,
value is calculated. And then for me personally, I think I value that international holiday more. So therefore, I go, right. But in the case of these services, these are essential services. You cannot say I don't want sewerage, but I rather spend my 8 ringgit on teh tarik, for example. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's not a comparison that way. See, so this is something that's an essential service. Now the question is whether are you getting value for money with 8 ringgit? What is the alternative you have? Do you have an alternative which is better and cheaper? No, people don't understand that, right? So they think that, hey, you are just channeling my waste into the drain, and then I'm paying you 8 ringgit for what?
mm, mhm,
That the
mm,
process that is actually being undertaken. I think that awareness is not so much there. Maybe like you say, among the younger people and all, it's there, but generally it's not there. But also apathy is that people don't care, lah. As long as I'm not affected, I don't care with this. You know. But as the society gets more educated and aware of many things, I think this will improve lah, as time goes along. Lah, you know. So, but I think Indawater as well as PAN and Ministry or whoever should be making more effort in this direction. That why is this an essential service? What is the alternative? There's no real alternative. So, and therefore, we come to this question of this monopoly thing that is here, which could be another argument why we think that tariffs should not be raised, because we think that, hey, this is a monopoly, and how do we know these fellows are doing, efficiently? Are they bloated? Are they overpaid? You see, so this is in the minds of people. As I mentioned about the tariff increase that was done by the local authority when I was
Mhm.
in Penang, and there was no outcry. You know why? Because they trust this is government. There's no profiteering here going on. There's no somebody up there who's making the money and skimming off the top. But the moment it became private, everything changed. They start
Mhm.
looking suspiciously. And in the water today, not many people really understand it's government owned, right? Because it is run like a private company. And
Mhm.
maybe people suspect that some skimming going on, or maybe there's some fellows who are getting fat salaries, and that's the reason why the salary is going up. So, how do you demonstrate that you are giving value for money? You are a monopoly. So this is why it comes to the point that I've also made before, that maybe it is time to have some kind of an indirect competition for indoor water. That instead of a single entity, maybe it should be broken up, at least administratively, to demonstrate some benchmarking that this is true cost. This is true cost. Otherwise, there's always be the question: are you doing it the to the best way? Of course, it cannot be exact, but at least ballpark lah. That 8 ringgit, actually it can be done for 2 ringgit, but you first getting bring charging me 8 ringgit. It's not that way, right? It may be 7 ringgit, okay lah, 8 ringgit lah.
Mm,
So,
mm,
so
mm.
that kind of value demonstration, I think, has to be done by some means, either through more transparent ways of operation and reporting to the public, more transparent ways of communication, or maybe there can be what you call benchmarking. And you cannot benchmark internationally because it's very hard to find something similar where you can show apple and apple comparison lah. So I'm proposing that maybe an internal competition, indirect competition. Yes, sorry.
See, I read a couple of articles, and when I really read and reread again, I sort of agree with how they present Malaysia's sewage industry. They say that this is one country that managed to turn around the sanitation and sewage sector in a single generation, and that wouldn't have been possible by the structure that has been put in place. I mean, put aside, of course, there had been, like, maybe there could have been attempts to do privatization in a more transparent manner. The governance structure that has been put in place actually followed. Okay, that is one part of it. But technically, as well as in the services side, it is true that in a single generation, the sanitation and sewerage sector had been turned
Yeah.
around. But what I really feel, sort of like, I don't want to use the word upset, but what I feel like more, what I feel at loss here is the work done are not being showcased in that manner. It
Yeah,
is not.
that's true.
It's not showcased in a way that, when we say public apathy, right? I really wonder why. Is it because lack of communication? And when we're talking about monopoly in this sense, yes, there could be a huge question mark every time there's a monopoly services. But isn't that what regulator is there in place? So isn't it the regulator's responsibility to show
Yeah,
it is a monopoly business? However, this is how we regulate it, and this is how we ensure they deliver the services, and then what you are actually getting in the end.
yeah,
The
yeah,
yeah. So I feel like there is a mechanism in place. The question
yeah.
is it being leveraged?
Correct, correct. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a regulator's role, definitely, that that it has to be showcased in that way, and why this is the best way to do it, or is there a better way? If there's a better way, I think the regulator should really explore that, and uh, because at the end of the day, when you don't demonstrate value, is when all these problem comes up. But anyway, I think we are going on the assumption that there is a huge resistance to the tariff, so which is not the
Yes, yes.
case from what you have said before. So it looks like maybe at the end of the day, all this exercise, and finally everyone will say, "Hey, yalla, let's go. I will pay for that." So in order also, you mentioned about the amount is so small that when people don't pay, Indowater has a problem of what we call enforcement of payment, right? because you can't cut off service like water. And the only way you could do is maybe, of course, you can send a debt collector and all to his house and everything, but at the end of the day, it's a legal means of recovery, and legal means cost money. And 8 ringgit will not justify a legal debt recovery. So then you have to wait for the amount to be accumulated to certain amount before you can go for legal means. And then there is a limitation period again. I don't know whether that applies. Some people say it doesn't for debts, but if it applies, then after a few years you find it's gone. So now that is one big thing. Second thing is that sending the bill out itself costs money. And if you have a bill that is 2 ringgit, sending the bill out may cost you maybe 50 cents or maybe more than that. So
Yeah.
how do you justify this kind of thing? So when you have a very low tariff, it's below the threshold of administrative efficiency, of billing and collection. So that itself will show that, hey, you need to have something better than this. And it's too small to even bother for many people. And when you see India water bill, yeah, what 48 ringgit for 6 months. So it's not so small. My Astro bill may be more than 100 ringgit, and my phone bill, the 2 or 3 phones that we have, maybe 200 or 300 ringgit. You know what I mean? So compared to all that, the utilities, this becomes so negligible, and it comes once in a while, once in 6 months. So all this makes the apathy even greater, So I think that may be one of the reasons why people also don't really bother to respond, to this question. So it must be brought to a more reasonable figure that reflects the importance of the service. Obviously, this service is far more important than Astro, right? Or your phone, you know.
I mean, yeah, Astro definitely, but no, this is something that I always, not just for sewerage, but also for water sector. Like in water sector, if you don't get water supply to your house, you're actually not paying because it's based on per meter run, right? Per meter cube that the meter is recording. When it comes to sewerage services, it's not really an option because it actually leaves your house. It's not like you're stopping and there's a meter for
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
So you're paying for the services. Uh, I mean, it leaves your house. Basically, you are not inconvenienced, or you're not facing any kind of health issues or whatnot. But what I find really interesting, now, that is my pet peeve here, is telecommunication. I don't get good Unify. Thank God today's fine. I don't get good Maxis where I'm sitting right now. I don't get a good Maxis line or network, but I have to pay. I'll be reminded right on the date if I didn't pay. So it's really like it makes me wonder, I have to pay whether I get the services or not. So they're actually recovering without, they're getting that full amount without providing it right to my mobile. So this is something that I really find, how did this happen, since why all these things? And it's like in the hierarchy of importance, I think somehow we have been indoctrinated
Mm.
to perceive the value of the goods in a very
Yeah,
distorted way.
that's
Yes.
right. That's right. See, that's the
And
perceived value that you mentioned. That's exactly the point. The perceived value.
mm.
So the perceived value of sewerage is very, very low. The real value is much, much higher. So how do you bring it that closer? That's the challenge here.
Actually, I feel like a good approach would be asking people who live in Botanic,
Huh?
those who had the failed vacuum system in Botanic, Klang, or
Uh-huh.
Sepang Putra. I think if really, this question is posed to them, they will be able to explain what
Yeah.
is the difference between a perceived value and the real value. I think
Real
that is,
value.
yeah, that's a missing thing here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, another part of it is I noticed that if you really look at this particular tariff in the public consultation paper, yes, one thing they talk about dislodging, which is emptying of septic tanks, and connected services. If your houses do not have a septic tank, that means you're connected to a sewage treatment plant. Just in case those who are listening today are not familiar, so I'm just explaining that. They also have introduced another types of three types of charges. One is abortive charge.
Sorry?
Uh, Abortive charge. That
Abortive
means
charge.
abortive charge. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, vaguely what I remember is That means they already agreed to accept that service for emptying septic tanks, and then the tankers have been mobilized, but then it has been refused. Another one is repeat dislodging. That means within a short time period, because it's supposed to be 2 years and 3 years. 2 years within local council areas, septic tanks within local council areas, and 3 years is outside local council areas. So, but if you repeat within more than within the designated time, if you request more, there's a repeat dislodging charges, and another charge is on traditional systems. So it's pretty significant charge per emptying. For the smallest one is 260, and the second tier is about 390. So I mean, do you think that this new introduction of this, and they have a minimum charge, which is 50% of the domestic. That means if you're paying, like, going to pay 10 ringgit, it's going to be a 5 ringgit a month minimum charge. So
Yeah.
do you think introduction, I mean, really, I do not know whether people read it or not, but I wonder whether, from my interpretation of the situation is, I think people do not mind paying these additional charges if they require that
Yeah.
particular, yeah.
So I
Because
think when we talk about dislodging charges, these are for the on-site systems, right? So dislodging, of course, there are two types. For maybe for our viewers, if they may not be aware, there is a demand dislodging and there's a scheduled dislodging. So when you have a septic tank, uh, it sort of fills up with the waste that is coming out of your toilets and baths and all that. And the solids are actually accumulating in the septic tanks. The liquid part, after the separation, the liquid actually leaves the septic tank and may go into a soak away or into a filter or some other, subsequent process. So what essentially happens is that it is a very basic form of treatment, and the sludge is accumulating and must be removed periodically. If it is not removed periodically, the functioning of the septic tank itself is affected, because there's not enough space within the septic tank for the settling to take place, and the sludge also starts overflowing out. So that is the reason why you need scheduled dislodging, which has now been introduced by SPAN. And I think they have introduced it to once in 2 years for local authority areas and once in 3 years for outside local, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah? So now, when you have demand emptying, what is that? That is before schedule emptying came in. You have a septic tank and it fills up, and then when it fills up and you find you can't use your toilet anymore, or you find the smell or overflow or something taking place in your house, you call the guy to come and empty, right? That's demand. Now, the key difference here is that demand dislodging is requested by the house owner, whereas scheduled dislodging is required by the regulator, right? The house owner may not want it. You see what I mean? So then the method of charging uh, has to be different. If it is demand, you can charge any amount, 500 ringgit he will pay, because he's got a problem in his house. But when
yes.
it is scheduled, he says, hey, look, my septic tank is no problem, not filled up yet. Why are you coming and doing this? So there is going to be a resistance on that. I think that part of it, we may encounter some problems. And second thing is that I think from India Water's perspective, maybe this, what you call, what was it? The denial, denial is it? The term you use. That is like you call them, and then when they come, you don't allow them to do it. that is wasted time and resources from their side. They're charging for that. That's fine. And the second one on POW flush. See, POW flush generally are a bit of an inferior system. So now here you have a slightly higher charge for POW flush, as I can see it. And POW flush generally it goes on demand, not on schedule, right? So then I think the tariffs are high, may encourage people to go for a septic tank. So that's good, because from a policy perspective, if the tariff encourages good behavior, that's a good tariff. So here is a way, hey, I keep paying this, my power flush keeps filling up and I'm paying, I don't know what was it, 300 something or whatever, 260 ringgit. I rather go for a septic tank, which is cheaper and functions better. It's a one-time improvement, which maybe benefit me in the long run. So that kind of behavior change, if it encourages, I think that's good. So I think for the scheduled dislodging, maybe there has to be good campaigns and some kind of enforcement to make sure it works, so that you don't get a situation where people who comply have to pay, and people who don't comply don't have to pay, which is very common in our scenario, right? In Malaysian scenario, like your summons. If you don't pay, wait long enough, then you get a discount. If you go and
Discount,
pay
yes.
it on time, you won't get any discount.
Yeah. I mean, before we go further on that part of the conversation, I just would like to welcome those who just joined us. Thank you very much for joining us in this for this conversation with Water Think Tank. Please subscribe, like, or do all that nice things on either Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. If you have any questions, do share what questions are. So we'll be taking up the questions. Neither myself or Mr. Dore representing the regulator span or India Water. We are just citizens who are very much passionate about this topic, and we feel like there's a need to share what are the things that are happening behind the scenes that requires. So it's not like we enjoy paying uh, parting with our money for no apparent reason, but this is a reason that makes sense. So, Mr. Dore, some of them have been mentioning that they can't see your good-looking face. You need to bring the screen down slightly.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I think some okay, some of them actually have raised certain comments here. They put there, okay, let's see, probably IWK can convert waste to biomass and diversify revenue from compost and power generation. And similarly, another comment says alternative, IWK can look at alternative sources of income like selling treated water to the industries. I mean, if you can share a little bit on that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, these are alternative sources, but we cannot deny, we cannot ignore the basic part of it. That the user and the beneficiary of the direct service, which is a core service provided by the operator, they must pay for that. These are subsidiary things. These are subsidiary things and may not really contribute that much, because we know that when you talk about biogas generation, there are many other factors as well. That there's a cost to it as well, capital cost to it, and there's a threshold. Only beyond that, it is viable. And sometimes, like gas generation, in our experience also, it's been quite problematic because of the dilute nature of our waste. And secondly, when you talk about reuse water, I think that's a promising thing, really. So here, I think the regulator actually has to come in. The regulator being a common regulator for water supply and sewerage, I think he's in a very good position to broker some kind of deals between the water supply companies and India Water to use the treated water for non-potable purposes, and that is good for the country in the long run. It is not a competition, that the water companies may see this as a competition to their thing, but this is something like raw water in a way that could be used. So yeah, these are promising things, and in many countries, these are all being put in the front. They always, when they start off on sanitation, they put this in front. We did not do that when we started in 1994. There was no talk about reuse, and until today I don't think we have a guideline. I may be wrong, for reuse of biosolids or resource recovery of water and things like that, whereas in most other countries they're already doing it from stage one itself. And that's one weakness that I think we need to correct. And secondly, also in many countries they try to use this bioeffluent and also what they call biosolids. Sometimes there is a society resistance. People who don't accept it because of where it's coming from. So sometimes it's not so easy, but yeah, we should try it, because there's a lot of resources in wastewater and they should be recovered. But to look at it as a major contributor of revenue, maybe not yet.
Yes, I think just to address that particular aspect that being raised just now by two of the viewers, I think there are few other things that from the public consultation paper, what they have put up is they have done cost optimization where they managed to reduce the operation cost per population from 35 ringgit and 80 cents to 31 ringgit and 80 cents. So that's pretty amazing, because I don't even know where they managed to pull most savings from there. And second thing is they have started non non-essential businesses such as collection of fat oil and grease from grease traps. So all the commercial outlets, food and beverage outlets, or any hotel that serve that has restaurants, normally they will have grease traps. So they are actually doing collections on that part of it. They are also allowing telco towers to be put in selected treatment plants, and sewer network is being used for fiber optic cables. And they are also, they have, I think most recently also we have heard about, they are signing deal with Selangor and Malacca, if I'm not mistaken, on reclaiming
Water.
water.
Yeah.
But as exactly like what you say, it's not something that is easy, because yes, signing the deal and getting agreement is one thing, but really getting these water operators to participate,
Yes.
because it is not really. I mean, there are two parts to it. It's not just as a revenue. I think there's a problem here. This is what I feel when it comes to resource recovery. When the regulator or the government sees that this particular initiative is to bring additional revenue to India Water, the way they react and create a good environment for that to happen is extremely low. If they look
True.
it from an angle, by doing this, it's a betterment for the environment. You use less of natural resources. The way they react is very different. They will participate and engage more. Otherwise, they are leaving actually, for the operator to go and sort out, because you're making money out of it. So I think
Yeah.
I really feel there's a need to change this mindset.
Yeah.
Resource
Yeah.
recovery is not for the India Water to make money. They are making money, that is fantastic. But resource recovery must happen. It's part of circular economy.
True.
And I
True.
think that's really
Agree.
missing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. Yeah. So I think that is the reason why also that this resource recovery part, whether it's from biosolids or for reuse of treated water, should be driven by government as policy in the national interest, rather than by India Water, which was being done for many, many years. They were coming up with guidelines, they were pushing this thing, and the whole reason for doing it was to augment their revenues. So that
Mm-hmm.
puts a whole new spin to things, That, hey, you are making money from this also, kind of thing, is it? So to me, we must ring fence the core business of
Mm-hmm.
sewerage services, and this is the cost of sewerage services, and this is the cost that must be borne from the revenue from sewerage services. Anything
Mm-hmm.
else is a bonus to the industry. You see what I mean? You cannot
Yeah.
say that, okay, I will recover from advertising, and I will recover from fiber optics, and therefore the tariff can be low. That's wrong, because it is distorting the cost to the
Mm-hmm.
public. It's distorting
Yeah.
it, that you
Yeah.
are doing something, and you are doing the using something else to augment that. That's
Mm-hmm.
not really allowed in a regulated business, isn't it? I mean, I may be wrong. So when you talk about it, when they ring fence, they prevent outflows, but you should also prevent inflows, because you want to see the true cost. You see?
That's one
So
part of it. Another part of it is when that happened, it seems like, I'm getting penalized for being innovative and creative.
correct,
So
exactly,
it
yes,
doesn't
and
encourage
and
innovation and creativity.
yeah, and I remember this, when I was in India Water, they were trying to put this advertising billboards in the treatment plants, which were near strategic areas, So you could put a huge billboard. What do you call those? Those huge billboards, like you
Mm-hmm.
see along the highways and all. So you have
Yes.
treatment plant, you can put it up, and that you can make a lot of money from that, rental of those things. And then, of course, India Water does not own their treatment plant, right? All these lands are owned by the Federal Land Commissioner. And then the Federal Land Commissioner comes along and says, hey, this is federal land. So what revenue you get from your non-core business must revert to the government's consolidated fund, not to you. So that put a stop to the whole thing. They were not doing it, And when India Water come up with the idea, they say, you do it, but we take the money.
Let's say a couple of questions here. We have a Facebook user says that perhaps once and for all, stop the plants purposely. People will ask, okay, I think it's kind of interesting for a conversation, but I think this is something that we never want to see happen. We
Yeah.
have another from Raja. I speculate that people don't mind the tariff, but they're actually concerned about where the additional money is going. Perhaps Mr. Doria
Yeah.
Punita can comment. W- would it be different if it was not fronted as monopoly?
Yeah. So I think this is where the transparency comes in. Like what you said earlier, is the job of the regulator to, of course, check this and present it to the people. Not just check for their own satisfaction. I think they have some, I don't know, Vira and whatnot. Some kind of regulatory accounting things which they are using. But maybe this has to be communicated to the people as well, where this money is going. And you also asked just now about how they reduce the cost. Was it trimming of fat? No, I think they also went for some kind of a productivity, what you call studies, to see how can we improve productivity. And they came up with many, many innovative ways in which cost can be brought down. So I think this kind of things must be communicated as well. That hey, we are going to so much effort to keep the cost down so that the tariffs can be low. You see, I don't think people are aware of this thing. People think they just do it, and then we don't know. Maybe they don't really need so many people, and what are they doing, kind of thing. You see, so that communication part I think need to be improved with better transparency as well.
Yeah. And we have another Facebook user here, our old friend Pravina. She says that there needs to be a political will to ensure such an essential service for Malaysian are top notch and the tariff should commensurate the operating costs. The service ensures public health is looked after. If IWK was not around, we would probably encounter many pandemics years ago. I think that's really true. It's almost
Yeah.
like became collateral damage. Improvement of services had become a collateral damage and it's not being recognized. Services has been improved, but tariff has remains the same. So if they didn't actually improve the services, that tariff would have matched whatever that's being done.
Yeah. So
I
I think here we also need to see the context of this in the sense in the future context, future context of this. When we look at Malaysia from outside the country, of course we leave out Europe and all this. I mean, they are in a different league, But you look at developing countries in the Asian region and all. Say for one or two exceptions, I think we are doing very well. And this, what you mentioned about in one generation improvement. When the privatization took place and over the last 20-25 years, huge improvements have taken place. And this is something we have built up as a foundation. We may not be the best yet, but we are in a position to become the best. And
yeah.
if Innovator keeps on operating under this constrained environment where they are going with begging bowl and cutting corners and it's being squeezed on every front, I don't think they can improve because they cannot retain good people. They cannot go for more innovative processes. They cannot develop more efficient processes. In fact, efficiency and everything may start going down, right? So I think for the national interest, I think it is important that this institution should be strengthened. And the way to do that is make them at least self-sufficient, make them at least break even first. They are not going to be big, high profit thing. Anyway, they are owned by the government, right? So uh, operating under this kind of constrained environment is not conducive to that.
Yeah.
Because many countries are forging ahead. You can see India, where I used to work in the last few years, they have moved ahead very fast.
Exactly.
Bangladesh, surprisingly, they are moving ahead very fast. Many African countries, so many Asian countries are moving fast, and not moving is just like moving back. So when you don't move fast enough, you find more and more people overtake you, and you are left behind in spite of you being an early leader. And many people right now still look up to Indowater. Yeah, there are shortcomings and all, which we know and we can correct. But the pros and the good things are so much. I think we need to build on that. This is for national interest sake, not for the sake of Indowater or their people or somebody up there, right? So it's more like this is what our nation needs, and we have it. We just need to build on it.
Yes. I think before we end, we are at 9:30 now. Before we end, we take one last question. I think this question is very interesting. Raja actually asking that if a list can be disclosed on what will change with the increased tariff, for example, is it reducing greenhouse gas emissions or more R&D work or increase of water recovery? That would be something that is, I guess, to show that with the increase of tariff, what are the things that will be done. But really, I mean, from really, I think in this case, it's a catch-up game, right? It's not to do.
Catch up, exactly.
This is a catch-up game because we have missed the inflation boat. We have missed the raising, because every time when energy goes up, I remember, oh, energy just went up, so we can't increase this. It's such a conflicting argument when you say that energy just went up, and here what they have reported is 62% of the operational expenditure is the treatment cost, and out of it is 26.5% is an energy cost. So automatically, by right, if the tariff is pegged to energy, I think that'd be the best, rather than reviewing it and discussing it again, and just peg it to the energy, knowing it's 26%. It's a huge impact.
Yeah.
So really, like for Raja's view, I mean, for Raja's knowledge, right? This is, I really feel this is a catching up game, catching up on the
It
inflation,
is.
catching
Yeah.
up on the
Yeah.
energy, and even catching up on the, this is my most passionate component when it comes to, because I worked there many years ago, many years ago. I felt like the tariff doesn't, sorry, the salary doesn't commensurate amount of work that the staff are doing. So I really feel like, um, of course, there's always a saying, dirty, dangerous works. It's not sexy. People do not really like. I don't think any university students, when they graduate, they say that my ambition is to work with India Water. So people who actually goes in this sector are those who are really, really passionate about it. And seeing that they are not enjoying the kind of salaries or status that deserves it, I feel like that is another part of it that really needs to be addressed, because otherwise
Yeah.
the sector will not be having a lot of good people left.
True.
I don't know what is your view.
Yeah, I think the catch-up point is definitely is one of the main things that we are actually catching up with what should have been done many years ago. But having said that, one of the things that the outcomes which the public may not see is that the subsidy may that the government is giving every year will reduce, right? So the government will not need to reduce that much. And second thing, again, a little invisible, is that sometimes when I used to work in the water, and these operation units put up budgets. So I always tell them, you have to have an asset management plan to back it, and say that, yeah, I need this to do A, B, C, D, and E, and if I don't get this amount, what will happen? you know so in other words, when you don't get the what you ask for in terms of resources, what is it that will be missing? It's exactly the reverse of the question that's being asked now. If I give you more, what will you do, right? So that question, many of them used to say, yeah, we can say that, but we cannot afford to fail. We cannot afford to say, I don't have money, so my sewer will overflow for the next 1 month. I will somehow or other fix it. I will put a band-aid. I might need to dig the thing up and repair it, but I might do something interim to prevent that. If the treatment plant is overflowing into the river where there's an intake, DOE will come after me. I have to, by hook or by crook, get it done. So that's how they work. So which means the risk that they are working under will be reduced when they have more resources at their disposal. So that will not be visible. It may be visible indirectly in terms of the number of incidents that people they meet. That the incidents that they meet may be less severity, less frequency, and that's a reduction of risk that we are talking about. But eventually, yes, I think it will have show some improvement and so on, which I think the government needs to also sustain it, because when you look at the graph that they have shown, you can see that after 2024, if I'm not mistaken, it sort of goes into the black. So the revenues goes above the cost. So that may be the time when they can start showing some improvements. Now, having covered that one, I just want to make one more point here, is that the tariff that is being proposed here is a fixed tariff. It's a fixed amount per house per month, right? Of course, it varies for the low cost and all that. But there are alternatives in the form of a volumetric tariff as well. So the volumetric tariff, of course, is not being proposed, but it's got many advantages in the sense that it puts some control in the hands of the householder, that you can reduce the amount of water you use and your sewerage bill goes down. Whereas with this fix, you don't get that. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at in the long run as well. That from a fixed mode, I think they need to go to maybe a hybrid mode, and then eventually maybe to a volumetric mode, which will then also serve the national interest of saving water. Because the sewerage bill also reflect the amount of water that you use, right? So I just wanted to make that one final point before I finish.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dore. So I think with that, we have passed about 5-6 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us today, having this conversation. And I'm also would like to thank all the viewers who have stayed until 9:36. And if you have the opportunity, the link to the public consultation has been tagged up in the comment. Please go read about it. Try to understand. If there's any questions, you can always post up in the Water Think Tank group, and we will try to respond to that. From our perspective, not from the perspective of India Water or SPAN, because we are an independent entity, and do be very practical and objective in responding to that. You know, not putting the emotions, put aside emotion, but more of a logical mind in responding to the public consultation. So with that, thank you everyone, and see you again.
Thank you.
See you later for some other program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dure. Bye bye.